Hello, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the executive producers behind Star Trek, PICARD. We'd like to thank our friends at CBS All Access and MRCPR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Daniel Holloway. Daniel is executive editor TV at Variety, where he oversees coverage of the television business across multiple platforms. His work has been recognized with the Southern California Journalism Award for Entertainment, News Reporting, and an Eddie and Ozzie Award for Investigative Reporting. Welcome, Daniel. Welcome, panelists. And please, Daniel, take it away.
When you all went to pitch this to Patrick Stewart, what did you feel like were the things that this character had to say to a contemporary audience and the real reason to do this right now?
Akiva, Michael?
Alex, I think you were the sharp end of the stick on this.
Well, I think we obviously Picard is, there's a lot of debate among Star Trek fans about who's the greatest captain of all time, and Picard is right at the top of many people's lists. And I think one of the things that we felt was the need to return ourselves to the anchor of having a great leader who took consequence into account, who considered his actions before he executed them, who led with some amazing combination of his heart and his mind. And if you talk to Star Trek fans, there's not a single one, even if Picard isn't at the top of your list, who doesn't want to see the continuing adventures of Picard and know what happened to him. And we knew that Patrick had said early on that he was not returning to that part ever again. He'd been offered it many times. And I think in some ways, maybe the experience that I was fortunate enough to have with Leonard Nimoy on the movies emboldened me enough to believe it was possible to turn him around, because Leonard had very much the same feelings about returning to the role of Spock. And not only did he do it with such beauty and grace, but he became a really good friend. And I think we felt like bringing Picard back at this particular moment in time what would be an amazing thing to do. Getting him to say yes, that was going to be the hard part. And because he'd said no so many times, he really came in with his arms crossed. He had a lot of respect for the work that the creative team here has done, but he really came in to respectfully pass to our faces when we pitched to him. And I think that in the back and forth that emerged between all of us and Patrick, our reasons were half because we were fans, half because we adored Patrick and we wanted to see what would happen. But it became an even more significant mission for us personally, because we knew that it means nothing. There's nobody it means more to than Patrick himself. And for him to return to that part meant that we could not in any way screw it up. The bar was so high, especially after he'd made Logan, which was such an unbelievable take on Professor X and Wolverine. And so the bar was there, and that challenge was really terrifying, but it was also the kind of challenge that we were probably foolish enough to take on, because you always want to reach for the highest bar. And the reason why, back to your first question, the reason why started as one thing and became something else for all of us along the way.
Akiva and Michael and Alex, could you all talk about what that initial pitch to Patrick was like, what you said to him and what he said to you, and once he warmed to the idea, what he wanted to see out of the show?
Well, I think Akiva, you should probably answer that, but before you do, I just want to follow up on something Alex was saying, which is that I think part of what happened here is Alex Kurtzman's ability and tendency to think big. And I think you can see that with all of the shows that he's made under the Star Trek aegis. And so, if I'm not mistaken, the idea about Picard bringing back the character Picard started as kind of a small idea for maybe for a short film, you know, but Alex, as he so often does, like immediately just was like, wait, why stop there? Like, what if we could get Patrick to do it? I think a tendency to think big is really underlies the fact that there is a Star Trek Picard TV show at all. So I just wanted to say that. But Akiva, I mean, I wasn't actually there for that first pitch.
Well, I mean, as you know, Michael, what you missed was a very loud and bellowing no. Honestly, couldn't have been less interested. As Alex said, I mean, you know, just super delightful, and also Captain Picard. So, you know, we were all sort of sitting there trying to not, you know, fall all over ourselves. And he was very kind and very gracious, and you know, and he let us pitch, which was nice. And then he said, but I think that he saw that we really, 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 really wanted him to like, if not it, us. You know, and Michael is likable. He wasn't there. Alex is really likable. I was pretending to be likable. Heather was sending likable signals. And over time, he allowed a little crack in the door. And this is, again, as Michael points out, this sort of Kurtzman perseverance, which is he's like, crack in the door. And so the foot in the door became Michael Shaban's prose. Michael has, you know, been known to fashion a sentence pretty well now and then. Let me be the first to tell you. So we harnessed the will and imagination of said Pulitzer Prize winning author and deep Star Trek fan to, you know, basically write some hybrid proposal, short story, series, document, 40-page long seduction, of which, how much ended up in the show, Michael?
I think that would be none.
None. And yet, the act of that, the reaching across the transom, that, and honestly, Michael's talent and all of us really thinking our best thoughts about how to do it, became a conduit, right? And so began a conversation, and that's what the show really. That's how the show really formed. The show is a conversation fundamentally between us and Patrick. It was discourse, it was what if, how about, and over time, he as a creative partner, in concert with the rest of us, made a thing. But it's not the thing we set out to make. It's the thing that we got to make. You know, it's been a delight. I mean, that we get to sit here and talk and see each other and see you is lovely. But man, this was one for the ages.
Yeah.
It should really be noted too that Kirsten Beyer, who has been with us for forever and ever, was the one who actually brought the idea of doing a short trek about Picard to the table. And that was the conversation that both Michael and Akiva were referring to, which is she had this really interesting idea, and you know, and it was so interesting, in fact, that I was like, well, we don't want to make a short story out of that. That feels like a waste of it. You know what I mean? Like you're only going to want more of it. And so the four of us all sort of began the task of saying, well, what would it be based on that? And ultimately, that's the document that he ended up reading. And,
you know, I think you know, you could get the idea. I think I might have had the initial idea when I heard about the resistance of Patrick's resistance, his long-standing resistance to reprising that role, and then to the initial approach, like, thank you, but no thank you. You might get the sense that that's, you know, somebody like the Alan Rickman character in Galaxy Quest, like, right, where he's just like, I don't, like, you know, but Grandpa's hammer, like, I don't want to go there again. I'm sick of it. I don't like that character. It's a burden to me. Like, that might be the sense you would form when you're hearing an actor who's so well known for having played this long-standing TV role doesn't want to do it. But it turned out, as soon as we actually started working with Patrick, it's so not the case. It's the opposite. Like, Patrick Stewart is the greatest living expert on Jean-Luc Picard, on the character of Jean-Luc Picard. It's not that he doesn't like the character or, you know, has like negative feelings toward that character at all. he's a very fierce guardian of that character. He's very loyal to that character, and maybe I think underlying some of his reluctance anyway to go back and do it again was that knowing just how important that relationship was to him, that it wasn't just going to be something he could do lightly. He was really going to have to invest heavily in taking over that part again.
Yeah.
Heather, could you talk a bit about assembling, this team? I mean, Alex clearly, it's clearly been having some things to do with Star Trek for a while. But I know that Akiva and you guys have a long relationship, and that Akiva has a terrifying depth of knowledge about Star Trek, and Michael is Michael Shaban. So, I mean, could you talk about like bringing this group of people together to make this happen?
Yeah, so we all worked with, and I don't even know if Akiva and I got to meet, but during Fringe, Akiva came on to Fringe, which is the show Alex co-created. And I think that was the time, right, where Alex and Akiva from then on became close friends and confidants with one another. And so when there was some tumult that you may have heard of on early days of Discovery, Alex said, you know who we should bring in to help us, and was Akiva. And so he was a huge part of the first season of Discovery. So I feel like then just has always been around, right? Like you have an office at our office, like we kind of can't get rid of Akiva in the best way. And then Akiva was producing our first run of short treks with us and said, oh, I have this friend, he's written a few things named Michael Shaban, and I think he could write a beautiful short. And so he did. I mean, Michael wrote this incredible short that we did in the first season. And I think just from then on, it was like the three of them and Kirsten discussing the shorts for the next season. And what if we do this? What if we do that? And I think much to the dismay of everyone who has to put all these pieces together on the deal side, they're like, Alex, stop bringing all of your really important people together in one room. But that's why you get this top heavy, amazing mind meld of people doing this show. So that's how it happened.
And I'll put a pin in it, but I have a question for Michael about that short at some point, because it is one of my favorite Star Trek things ever. From also for Heather, I mean, you don't see it a lot in this show, but there are moments when Patrick or Brent Spiner appear in the old uniform. This is a different sort of beast from Discovery, where you have an expectation that it's going to look different from original Star Trek. Next Generation was more recent. There were movies not too long ago. Could you talk about sort of creating a world for this show that would look recognizably like Next Generation enough, but would also, feel current and feel like what we expect from TV at this level right now?
Well, a big factor was we didn't want it to be a reunion show of TNG. Like it was really the next chapter of Jean-Luc Picard. And so I think great detail was taken with Holloway Culpepper, who directed the pilot, about what would that look be? Well, he's more mature. He's more pensive. He's at a more thoughtful place in his life. We meet him and he's on his vineyard. And so, using a lot of gorgeous oranges and yellows and making it feel different from Discovery. Discovery tonally is just completely different from the show. So not only distinguishing it from TNG, but distinguishing it from Discovery was really important. And I believe that when Patrick first even signed on, he said, but I will not wear the uniform from TNG. And then of course, the first thing we asked him to do, but will you wear the uniform? And the day that he was so reluctant, right? And again, not for a disdain, I think that was so well said, Akiva, but because of this great reverie and not wanting to do what he'd already done, what is the next chapter? But I videoed and I wasn't allowed to video, and Brent Spiner called me out on it while I was videoing it. The moment where the two of them were in their uniforms for the first time, it was in the pilot, It's a Dream, where Picard sees Data painting. And the look on the two of their faces, I mean, everyone around, whether you were a Trek fan or not, it was, they were pretending, I think at first, oh, we're gonna get in these uniforms. And then they were just giddy about the whole thing. And it was really special. So again, I feel like I should sell my B-roll, right? Because it was super elite. Like Brent was like, did you not get the message, Heather, that you're not allowed to video on set? But it was priceless. So again, the calls to it, I think were necessary, and not that we owed it, but I think, there's a love for it but I think it was important to sprinkle them in. And that's why I think when you get moments like Jonathan Frakes and Marina show up, it's a moment, it's not the whole thing. And I think it made those moments stand out even more.
To Heather, to something you just said about this not being, a sort of revival of TNG, you all could have easily made this like a solo hero story, which isn't something that we normally see in Star Trek, but it could have been that. What was the thinking behind the decision to build sort of a new ensemble around him and make the show, very much an ensemble in that sort of traditional Star Trek way?
I feel like you guys should speak to that. Yes?
Well, I mean, I think that one thing we know we definitely took for granted, as has been said, is that we weren't going to be bringing back the whole TNG crew. And that's not what the show was going to be. So then, as you say, I guess then the two most obvious options after that become either we just do a show only about Picard, essentially, and wouldn't be a one-man show, but it didn't have to be sort of a crew, I suppose. Or you make some kind of a new crew. I feel like we just sort of, maybe I'm wrong, guys, I feel like we just kind of went with the second one just sort of naturally, or I don't remember actually debating it. Or
I think there was also this thing, which I think we talk about all the time, and it's an endless kind of journey, which is a fun one, which is, what are Star Trek values? What does Star Trek mean? And how do you tell a Star Trek story to people who don't necessarily know Star Trek? So, we were trying to be, we were sort of equal opportunity storytellers in our minds. We wanted you to like it if you've never seen a Star Trek episode, and like it maybe a little bit more if you had, right? So that the sort of the canon knowledge is there to enhance the experience of somebody who, like us here, have a history with Star Trek, and one that's personal, and that Star Trek meant something to us, as it did to a lot of people, which is something Alex talks about very articulately and beautifully. And it's the truth. Star Trek is meaningful to people. And then there were those who came to watch a TV show and learn about Star Trek and have that romance afresh, right, or new. So that's what we kept doing. And one of the Star Trek values is camaraderie, is family, is the, how do these disparate individuals form a more perfect union? And Star Trek is aspirational in that way. Is everybody going to get along? Yes, everybody's going to get along. It's going to be tough at first. We're going to get there that's part of what I think we come to Star Trek for. And so in order to take a different Picard, an alienated Picard, a displaced, an older Picard, and put him on a journey, which was necessarily, yes, a journey into space, but we're a lot of old Jews here. There's just a lot of touchy-feely kind of like, let's tell stories about how people feel. Ultimately, it was a journey of the heart, and that one was going to be about connection to other people, ergo a crew.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, there's a thing in the show. I mean, certainly it's there with Picard, but you see it even with Riker and Troy when they show up. There's just like sadness hanging around these characters, and it's not necessarily how when you left these characters at the end of that last movie, with the exception of Data getting blown up, which I think a lot of people disavow. It's not where you imagined that their lives might be. I mean, you'd spend the entire season unpacking Picard's sadness. Riker and Troy, they've lost a child. They're sort of living in kind of paranoia. Can you just talk about that decision and how, and whether or not you knew that would contrast with what people might expect or hope for from the show?
Sure. I think partly, there are givens that you start with, and those givens in ways that you may not even be fully aware of as you start, determine the nature and shape of the show. So for example, Patrick Stewart, when we started this, was what, 78 or something like that. Look at his face. Like, look at the face of Patrick Stewart now, and then turn on an episode, for a counter at Farpoint, or from the first season, and a whole story is told in the difference between those two faces of the same man. And time is cruel, and so part of the story you're obviously going to be having to tell is a story about how the cruelty of time. Like, that's just going to be built into what you're doing right off the bat before you even necessarily know it, or else you're going to be doing something that's very inauthentic and trying to show, a man of Picard's age, which is 90 something in canon, doing things that a man of that age just wouldn't do anymore. So that's built in. And another thing that's built in is once you've made the decision, okay, we're going to tell a story about Picard, but we're not bringing back, it's not going to be TNG2, so we're not going to be bringing back Geordi and Worf and Riker and Troy and all these people all at once, so all be together. So where are they in his life? If they're not such an active part of his life anymore, why not? What happened? How did Picard let himself get into this position where he is, as we first meet him, quite isolated? And then then it becomes this journey of, as Akiva was saying, sort of reintegrating himself into the human family, into the Star Trek family, the Federation family, whatever you want to call it. And he meets these new people along the way. But you have to sort of account just from the get-go for the absence of all of those old friends in his life. And that feels like it's inevitably a little bit of a sad story, at least a little bit of a sad story. So, some of these things just arise from your having to handle the givens of the practical situation that you find yourself in with an actor, with a mandate, with a brief to tell certain kinds of stories and not to tell others. I think that comes from the difference too between serialized television and episodic television. And almost all of the episodic almost all of the Star Trek we've ever seen up until Discovery has been episodic, except with Deep Space Nine, where they started to experiment more and more with serialized storytelling as that show went on. And those stories themselves are quite dark. Those serialized Deep Space Nine stories, they're all about the Dominion War and the ways that the Federation compromises its values to achieve victory and so on and so forth. So I think inherently, when you have an episodic TV show, you start the clock over again. Like, there's a problem. Dr. McCoy injects himself with a drug that drives you insane. And in Harlan Ellison's original version of that, it was actually like an addiction. He is having a drug problem. But the nature of episodic TV is, even if it was Harlan Ellison writing it, by the end of the episode, he would be free of his addiction. And you move on and you kind of never mention that ever again. Whatever the terrible personal problem a regular series character might be having at the top of the episode gets resolved by the end of the episode. The heartbreak of the loss of Jim Kirk's like 4,700 great loves of his life that come back, and he gets all wistful about them, and then like you've never heard of them before and you never hear about them ever again, right? So that kind of militates, I should say, against the kind of storytelling where characters kind of really have to wrestle with their inner demons over a prolonged period, the way we all do in real life. The episode or serialized storytelling invites you to do that more, and I think that was another sort of unavoidable result, in a sense, of the kind of story we were telling, which was 10 episodes long. So I think a lot of those things were less choices than us trying to take the things we had to deal with and turn them to our advantage in whatever way we could.
Alex, this is a softball, but I mean, Michael just mentioned Harlan Ellison. I assume Michael is a lot easier to work with than Harlan Ellison was. But I mean, having Star Trek at your disposal, and not just one show, but like all of Star Trek at your disposal. I mean, how much fun has it been to be able to go out and find people like Michael Shaban to work with, because you could say like, hey, here's this thing, and there's a good chance that you love it, and would you like to help me make a piece of it? And I would imagine that you have those opportunities a lot.
I mean, the honest answer is that it's the greatest job in the world, with no full stop. It's the greatest job in the world. And the thing about Star Trek is that I think it attracts amazing minds, because it speaks to how important it is to think differently, and it speaks to how important it is to hold on to a vision where the best of us survive, where science matters, where friendship and family matters, where we have to work through complicated problems and come up with complicated solutions that don't always tie up in a perfect bow. Star Trek started getting more and more, it started living more comfortably in gray areas as it went on and on and on. And, I mean, in the case of Michael, Cavalier and Clay is my favorite novel of all time. And so, I thought our relationship was going to end at Calypso, which would have been for me amazing. Like full, just incredible. The fact that it continued on through Picard and continues on even now through other things, through Cavalier and Clay, is such a gift. And I think that's the gift of Star Trek. And you meet people like Michael or Akiva, to whom it meant so much as children, in whom it embedded itself, and it in some ways shaped their thinking about storytelling. That's the kind of thing that, I don't look I feel like my job is to plug people into the machine, but not necessarily to and to give them my opinion and guide and help it. But the last thing that I want to do is say like, this is how you should do it. In fact, I think that would be such a huge disservice to how the evolution of where Star Trek has gone in the last couple of years and can continue to go, because my sense is that it's going to grow more and more by virtue of the fact that it will have distinct voices and auteurs guiding each show. You don't want to feel like you're getting from one show what you're getting, one Star Trek show what you're getting from another Star Trek show, and the way to avoid that is by allowing creators like Michael or Akiva to do their thing, and I think sometimes my job is to tackle block, to get them more resources to do what they need, but on a personal level, it's been a very tough 4 years for a lot of people. No matter what side of the line you're on, it's just been really, really tough. And to be able to go to work at a place where you can actually exercise some of those demons in the work itself and talk allegorically about what's happening now, as the best of Star Trek has always done from the beginning, is a interesting form of creative therapy. And I think when you look at the shows, whether you like the shows or you don't like the shows, it's very hard to deny how much passion is put into them by many, many artists across the board. And not just the creators who do the writing, but down to props and down to, visual effects and costumes. And everybody is an artist who loves Star Trek. So I think the hope is just that you create a tent big enough to hold everybody, and you invite everybody in, and you create a safe space for it to keep going,
I want to ask all of you, because I know that you each have, Alex, you mentioned Cavalier and Clay, which is not Star Trek, but I know it's the next thing that Michael is working on, and in some ways has been working on for decades. And Akiva, I know that you have Strange New Worlds, which is, a lot of fans are really very excited about. But I also know that the last year threw everyone's plans into chaos. So, I mean, where are you guys at in terms of season 2 of this show? And then 2, with the broader roadmap for what each of you is doing sort of within and outside of this world, where are you at?
Well, Akiva, you want to speak to the Picard and Strange New Worlds at all?
Sure. We're close. We, like everybody else, we continue to navigate the vagaries and dangers of the world. Obviously, actors are by necessity going to be in small groups with no masks, right? So the protocols in terms of shooting and safe shooting are very, 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 they're really excellent. And so I'm in Toronto. You catch me snowed in quarantine. We're just about to start Strange New Worlds, and everybody has gathered for the beginning of the season. The same thing is happening right now in Los Angeles for PICARD. And so both of those shows will be launching production within the next, call it 30 to 60 days. They're very different shows. PICARD will continue to be its own serialized self. Strange New Worlds will do a little bit more. I thought, Michael, what you said was, I never quite thought of it that way, but it's really true. Like the number of triumphs over an episodic season are just, they're just more of them. Like people just have more wins because you got to win almost every episode. So we'll be, looking for more episodic wins. Alex undersells himself. It's kind of a creative cabal. People come in but never leave. It is like the best version of the Hotel California, and we talk to each other all the time. We rely on each other all the time. We talk about Star Trek ad nauseum and other things, and it's a very rare thing. And Alex is right that somehow the creation of Star Trek has become a fractal, a teeny mirror of the ideals of Star Trek. Everybody likes doing it together more than not. And that's so rare in Hollywood, where everybody is just looking to move on and say all the good was my fault and all the bad was somebody else's. And this is quite the opposite. So for that, as well as the kind of extraordinary set of minds around, it feels like this future of Star Trek is about as bright as it's ever been when you put it in the hands of literally a person who actually, I think Alex has never, ever said, I can't do it. I don't know what happened to you. Did you give you food when you were a baby? And like, he's just like, we can do it. And he turns out to be right. So it's pretty cool.
That's very kind of you. I do have to throw to Heather, really, because Heather's my partner on these shows at Secret Hideout, and there's so much insane work that gets done to make these shows happen that the press never really knows about, just at a producerial level. And as Heather mentioned, just like putting those deals together to get everybody in a room when you don't have the budget for really even one of them, let alone four of them, is really hard. It's really hard. And
you guys get paid?
No, we don't.
No.
But that's a really tough thing to do, and also to sort of, someone has to say, okay, I love that you're painting on the walls, but here's where the walls end. You know what I mean? Like, you have to stay within this box, and it's hard for creative people because you just want to keep drawing all over the place and keep going. So I think in some ways that push-pull is part of what makes it real and makes it happen.
Thank you. I am a professional herder of cats, very creative cats, so it's very satisfying. But I think what's also been so great, because it's funny that people come and they never leave, and I love the Hotel California reference, but is we've also been able on this project to work with people now from so many different shows we've done, like whether it's our producer director on PICARD is someone we've worked with since Sleepy Hollow, same with our visual effects supervisor. And now our DP on Discovery is someone who was the DP on Sleepy Hollow, and our composers from here, and this one's from there. And it's the first project where I think everyone's jumping in like, oh my God, I get to work on that. and everyone's coming in just so excited about it. And it is a great group of people who are just excited to be there. I think you walk on, and these shows are hard. I mean, they're big, so that makes them hard. But whether you walk on the set of Discovery or Picard, and I'm sure Strange New Worlds will be the same, it's pretty happy crews. Like, people are, even during COVID, I mean, like, people are freaked out, but they're in it together. And people they feel good about the work they're doing.
And the Star Trek love goes deep. I mean, I remember so many times when we were shooting the first season of Picard, of crew members going, way into levels of camera crew, sound crew, all kinds of, guys would just come up to me and like just grab me by the elbow and be so excited to be working on a Star Trek show. That to have some little tidbit of lore that was important to them, they wanted to share, whether it was they went to this convention and saw Leonard Nimoy do that, or whether they had worked on an earlier version of Star Trek, incarnation of Star Trek. And so I think it's really hard not to feel grateful to have the opportunity to do anything to contribute to carrying on with this 60-year-long tradition, 60, whatever it is now. To be able to just go to be a part of that is so gratifying.
Oh, Daniel, I think you're on mute.
It was going so well. Really.
It's a cool technique. Rectian.
Hey, thank you all so much for doing this. This is it's great to talk with you guys about Star Trek and about this show, and congratulations again. The first season was great. We're really looking forward to the second season.
Thanks so much,
Yeah,
Daniel.
thank you.
For your time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
Be well.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.